This podcast is intended for educational purposes only. Please check out Natural Care Midwifery and our podcast page for our full disclosure. Well, welcome back to More About Birth. I'm here with Shannon Bennett, and she has a special guest today. So, Shannon, who's your guest today?
This is my friend, Andrea Dietzen. She is a woman extraordinaire. She is mother, wife, yoga teacher, childbirth educator, and doula. And today I've got her here so that we can talk about her role as a doula.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I'm excited to be here.
What's a doula?
What is a doula? That's the question that everybody wants to know.
That is the question.
It's an interesting word, I can tell you that. It's always been kind of doula.
Yeah, when I go and talk to somebody I've never met before and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I say, "Oh, well, I'm a doula." And they go,
"What?"
They get that look in their eyes. Like, So, sometimes I feel like it's helpful to first explain what a doula isn't to help make sense of what a doula is.
Awesome.
All right.
So a doula is not a medical professional. I'm not a midwife. I'm not a labor and delivery nurse. And I think that's a really important distinction to make because I don't do things like check your
whatever that thing is. Yeah. Your vagina, your cervix.
I don't check the cervix. I don't put my hands anywhere near your vagina.
Good to know.
You either, Shannon.
Good to know.
I don't take blood pressures. Anything.
No fetal heart tones.
No fetal heart tones. Right. I don't measure the belly, and I don't give medical advice either.
So would you call yourself more of an emotional support and a coach?
So a support person, because we provide a lot of different types of support. Number one would be emotional, but it's also physical support with hands-on techniques.
So why do you need a doula if you've got a labor coach, a partner, a mom, your husband?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
It's a really good question. It's a question that we get a lot as doulas, especially when we're meeting prospective clients for the first time, is, people have a fear of, are you going to replace my partner? My spouse, It
is a real fear, yeah.
It is a real fear. And I understand where people are coming from because they don't want this special moment in their life to be overshadowed by somebody else. So really a doula's job is not to replace your support partner. And I really feel like they're actually a really important part of our team because we all work together to make sure that things are running smoothly, to make sure mom is feeling supported. And I really appreciate when I have a good partner to work with in the room. A lot of times we become, connected in a way where we don't even have to talk.
Sorry, I've got a cough drop in my mouth.
So sometimes we even start using like hand signals to talk about what we need to do next together. But I always say that a doula's job isn't to take over the role of the support person. It's to help them support you.
Well, I can tell you when I was at the hospital with my first child, I had no idea what I was supposed to do.
Right.
So to have someone there in the hospital, it was a hospital birth, would have been amazing for me because I was clueless.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I was the husband, but I didn't know what my role was. So someone else there to tell me, a little nicer.
Right.
I think you were still at work and you sent your mother.
No, there's no way. There's no way I would have stayed at work.
The truth comes
He's
out.
like, what can I do?
Well, sometimes I feel like it's not fair that we place high expectations on the support person, the fathers, to automatically know how to support their wife or friend or person in labor because it's not something they've ever been trained to do. It's not something they've ever had to do before. And that's where I come in. So there's a great analogy I like to use, and I try to explain to people why you need a doula and a support person. And I say it's like climbing a mountain for the first or the fifth time, really. You might decide one day to climb a mountain, but you don't just get up and day two go out and do it without any preparation. I don't recommend it. I'm sure there's people that have, but they might not have come back.
Probably didn't make it, right?
Probably didn't make it. But your husband, your spouse, your partner, if they're not a mountain guide already, you wouldn't rely on them to tell you how to reach the top of Mount Everest.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, right. Great analogy.
Because they've been there before, they've gone through it before, and a doula becomes that for you then, as a woman having a baby.
So as a doula, as a mountain guide leading you up Labor Mountain, we have the knowledge of what the paths look like to get to the top. We have the knowledge of how we cope with changing situations. We've
been there, done that.
We've been there before. We've supported other people up the mountain, and we can carry our snacks and water bottles for you to make sure you're hydrated and fed.
So what you're telling me is that you're basically there for mom and dad, or mom and partner.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Extra hands. So how do the dads react then, in your experience?
Really positively.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Really positively. In fact, even dads that were not sure about hiring a doula have come afterwards and told me when I go see them at their house after the baby is born, how grateful they were that they decided to have a doula, because they felt like they had more tools to help their partner.
They probably didn't even realize they needed one.
Right. Most of the time they're like, I got this myself. And I always say, if you want to take charge and you want to be the lead, I'm happy to play second fiddle. I'll tell you what I would do, you know?
Right.
I'll tell you to put your hands on mom or get her a cold towel. And I have no ego in the birth room. I'm there just there to serve the family.
So I tell people doulas are not there, and midwives also. We're not there to replace your partner.
Absolutely not.
We're there to complement them and encourage them and walk them through it.
Yeah. And I think the other important thing to talk about too is I'm not there to replace your medical support team either.
Right.
So when I come into a birth room, I'm not there to tell your doctor what to do. I'm not there to tell your labor and delivery nurse what to do. Number one, because I don't have a medical degree, which is pretty important, right? And number two, because I don't want them to feel like I'm taking over their role in the room. Their job is important and my job is different from theirs.
And speaking of their role, how are you received as a doula in our local area?
So my personal experience has been really overwhelmingly positive.
Awesome.
I feel like a lot of the care providers we have here and a lot of the labor and delivery nurses we have here are really glad to see doulas in the birth room.
And I've heard really good things about the doulas in our local hospitals.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think the doulas that we have here in the Tri-Cities in particular are really good about making sure that we're introducing ourselves, making sure that we're not getting in the way of when the care providers need to do their job, letting them know that we appreciate them. We like our labor and delivery nurses.
Yes. Yay for you.
We love our midwives. We love our obstetricians. And we want to help make everybody's job more easy.
Yeah. And do you guys wear like a name tag or anything when you go in so that people recognize you as a doula, or do you try to go in kind of incognito?
So some people do and some people don't. There's pros and cons. Some doulas wear scrubs and a name badge, but some providers at the hospital say that's confusing because they feel like you're trying to look like hospital staff.
Yeah.
Right.
So personally, I don't. I might wear a doula t-shirt or something like that, but I'll make sure that I introduce myself because I don't want to portray like I'm a medical personal provider.
And in reality, Shannon, isn't it true that doulas would spend more time in hospitals than midwives do, right? You go to a hospital, you're a home birth midwife.
I have told people over and over, doulas usually are at a birth longer than a midwife is.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
the doula comes early on to labor with you, even in early labor sometimes. And as a midwife, we generally come in active labor.
Right. And as a midwife or a nurse or an obstetrician, you're typically having to deal with a lot more than just one person that's in labor at a time. You're having, appointments. You're having multiple people in labor. As a doula, I set up my schedule and my structure so that I'm only with one person at a birth at a time.
Good point.
That's awesome. So do you spend most of your births at hospitals or home births?
I feel like it comes in waves. Sometimes I have 10 hospital births in a row, and sometimes I have a bunch of home births. I feel like in the Tri-Cities, most of the births that we attend are hospital births because people feel like a doula is more needed in a hospital birth.
Right. Although I was talking to my student, Angie, and it would be awesome to have a doula at every home birth.
Absolutely.
Because there comes a point where we have to chart and take care of vitals and exams and fetal heart tones. And
I need you to do your job, right?
Right. And if someone could be right there, focused on the other.
And we've worked together a few times at home births, and we make a great team because if things get intense and she needs to focus on the medical side of things, I can be right there with mom at her head, talking to her,
and we always laugh because it doesn't matter how few or how many people are at a birth. Somehow they're all needed.
Right. You always need that extra set of hands.
We can have 2 of us and have dad sleeping in the other room and we're fine. And sometimes we can end up with mom, mother-in-law, the doula, and the partner there, and the midwife and the student, we're all busy.
And you know what I think, just from my perspective, I think that having a team around you, regardless of what you're doing, and that to me sounds like you have individual focuses. You and Angie get so busy in the birth stuff and charting and all that stuff that there's someone else that's just totally completely paying attention to mama. It'd be huge.
In fact, I have seriously considered upping my price for midwifery just a little bit for each first-time mother.
To include a doula.
Yeah.
To provide a doula for them, because it would make my job less stressful.
Absolutely.
It would make their birth better.
And you know what's really interesting is when I talk to people, I tell them the most important work that I do really isn't at the birth. It's the preparation we do beforehand.
Yeah. And what about after? So you do a few appointments before the birth.
I do, yeah.
You attend the labor and the birth. About how long after the birth do you go home and leave the hospital?
I generally stay with the family for the first couple of hours after the birth, as long as I'm wanted and needed there.
Right.
So if they're looking for some privacy, I will obviously respect that and go home.
Which brings something up. I heard from one of the OB nurses that there's a new policy that's been implemented in the hospitals locally that they want mama and partner and baby to have their private time to establish nursing without interruption afterwards for the first couple of hours. Now, are they allowing doulas to stay there for that time to help?
Yeah, so really what they're trying to do is protect what we call the golden hour, which I'm sure you've heard about, which is the hour after birth where you're just flooded with birth hormones. It's the best time to breastfeed because the baby is more awake and alert. And so I don't get into people's faces or distract them during the golden hour. I continue to support from the sidelines.
So you're just kind of there as needed.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm getting extra pillows to support mom's arms up to allow her to nurse, or making sure that she gets a snack. Absolutely. Make sure she gets some sugar in her. A lot of times I'm the first breastfeeding hands-on support. I'm not a lactation support counselor.
But you nurse some babies in your time.
Well, we all learn about lactation through our doula training.
Right.
So we can do basic first hands-on support with mom and baby. And then if we feel like it's getting out of our scope of practice, we refer out.
Sometimes just your body being there, just that emotional presence is all that's needed, and it's important. So you leave a few hours afterwards. What happens after that? Are there postpartum visits that you do with mama?
Yeah, so I typically check up on people first via phone or text message within the first 24 hours after the birth, just to make sure something hasn't changed.
Right.
Everything's still going pretty smoothly. And then I play it by ear depending on how they're feeling when they want me to come and have the first visit.
So you do a home visit?
I do a home visit, yes. I come back to the house after they've been discharged from the hospital, or sometimes if they have an extended stay, I'll come visit them in the hospital again.
Great.
And we get, in my basic package, it's 1 2-hour postpartum visit.
So you do 2 or 3?
I do 3
2-hour prenatal.
I do 3 2-hour prenatal visits.
And then at least one.
And then at least one postpartum visit. And I always allow people to add on more postpartum visits if they feel like they want some extra support.
And at that postpartum visit, are you actually doing things like maybe doing the dishes, switching laundry, helping with breastfeeding? I mean, just whatever's needed, right?
Yeah. So I always like to do a little debriefing of the birth to make sure that we are able to talk about anything that happened, make sure that they have a safe space to tell their story from their perspective again.
Right.
And then after we do some talking, or if they don't want to talk about it, which is absolutely valid, I'm just there to do whatever is needed.
That's awesome.
Sometimes I'm doing dishes. Sometimes I'm entertaining a 2-year-old. That's a little bit over exuberant about the new baby. Sometimes sometimes they just have questions. I've had parents that want me to bathe their baby for the first time.
Yeah.
at their house. So I'm giving
freaked out about it.
They're a little nervous, right?
Yeah.
And I've had a ton of babies, and I've handled a ton of newborn babies.
I don't want to break it, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They don't want to break their baby, and they don't want to put soap in their eyes.
That's how I felt, man. I thought, I'm a big guy. I didn't want to hurt this baby.
Right,
So-
because they're tiny
Yeah.
and they're slippery.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, let's take a break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about how you decided to become a doula.
Okay.
How do you become a doula? Do we need more in the Tri-Cities?
Yeah.
And maybe the average cost of hiring a doula.
Sounds great.
All right.
Awesome. Well, that's the first
We'll do
half.
that.
We've been here with Andrea Dietzen and learning all about the word doula and what she does. So we'll be right back after the break. Come back with us. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only. Please check out Natural Care Midwifery and our podcast page for our full disclosure. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only. Please check out Natural Care Midwifery and our podcast page for our full disclosure. Well, welcome back from the break. We've had some fun laughter during the break. We're glad that you stayed with us. We're here with Andrea Dietzen and Shannon Bennett, your host, and we're talking about doula. So what are we going to talk about now, Shannon?
Well, I want to talk about why you became a doula and how in the world you become a doula.
Sure. Those are great questions. I feel like my doula path really started when I was preparing for the birth of my first baby.
Mm-hmm.
I was a single mom. I didn't have a lot of support. And so I felt like I needed to do a lot of research and really delve into the world of birth so I could prepare. And I had a doula attend my first birth and really appreciated the help and support of my doula and my midwife, who was amazing. I loved her.
This was in California, right?
This was in San Diego. Yeah, she was great. And then I guess I kept talking about birth afterwards because
you became a birth junkie.
I did. I was one of those people. And my sister got pregnant, and she asked me to attend her birth. And I said yes. And I feel like when I think back on that memory, I think that there's certain times in your life where you find yourself in a situation and afterwards you just go, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was it, you know?
I know that feeling.
Yeah, I had that moment as a midwife.
And I really felt that supporting my sister through her labor and her birth. And when she talked to me afterwards about it, she just said, I don't know how you did what you did, but whatever I needed, you suddenly understood and just did
awesome.
it. And I was like, yeah, I did do that, didn't I? Without a lot of training or anything, I was able to support her. And that felt really good to know that I helped her through that experience.
I remember that feeling as a doula years ago when I was doing doula work. And then I thought to myself, well, if I really enjoy doing this,
right,
let's get some training. So how did you go about becoming a doula and getting officially certified?
Yeah. So the funny thing is I kind of ignored that call for a while.
Yeah, you loved it. You talked about it, but you didn't dive in right away.
Well, I had a young baby. I was
It's a
busy.
big commitment.
It's a big commitment.
Realize.
And
you're on call all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Once you take a client, you're on call because babies come off schedule.
37 to 42 weeks.
Or
and
earlier.
doulas, as opposed to midwives, attend births before 37 weeks. We can't do that as home birth midwives.
And when people go into preterm labor, it's really important that we can be there for them.
Yeah, even more important, yeah.
So if I'm ever out of town, even if I'm not close to someone's due date, I have to have a backup.
Yep.
Anyways,
It's a big commitment.
I never know when a baby's going to come. But so I kind of ignored this calling that I had for a while. And you know what started happening? All the doulas that I knew, all the prenatal yoga instructors that I knew, all of my friends, my midwife.
They were probably all going, Andrea.
They went, Andrea.
You were made for this. You have the genes.
They said, why aren't you doing this yet? And funny enough, the way I took my first official client is my doula called me up and she said, you need to start doing this. And I have someone that wants to hire you.
Oh, you kind of got shoved into it, Army volunteer.
Got your first client for you here.
Worked. And you've been doing this for how many years now?
So 2009 is when I first started.
Awesome. So about 11 years.
About 11 years with some breaks, when I've had babies.
What
and
official training did you get when you decided to get that training? Was it through a particular organization?
Yeah. So I was really lucky in that I had like an apprentice. Mm-hmm. What would you call? I was the apprentice. Mm-hmm. What are they?
A mentor.
Mentor. I had a great
Preceptor.
mentor who trained me in everything she knew with her loads of experience. Uh-huh. And then I also did a training. And so I feel like I really got a fast track because she gave me all the tips that she had learned through her career. And then I did training through Birthing from Within. And there are a lot of different organizations that offer doula training.
I think DONA, the Doulas of North America, is one of the more well-known.
Yeah, DONA's really big.
Necessarily the only one.
No, there's so many now. And when people ask me, how should I get started? I say you just need to research the organizations and find the one whose mission fits your purpose. So I'm maybe a little bit on the crunchy side of things.
Crunchy?
So I have a science background, first of all. I just want to say science
and
is
you're
real.
Crunchy.
I'm a crunchy scientist.
Crunchy. Is that like granola crunch? Is that
like naturally minded?
Oh, okay. I get it.
But also really into the emotional side of labor support.
Right.
And so that's why I picked Birthing from Within, is because they're all about the emotional, psychological preparation.
So you're saying that there's a lot of choices out there that all have a different flavor.
They do.
Fit everybody.
Some are really about the business side of the doula work. Some are really about the emotional side of the doula work. Some are really into advocacy in the birth room. And so you need to pick an organization that fits how you feel. Because you don't want to get trained and then 5 years down the road decide that you guys don't fit anymore.
So is this like workbook and then you thought you do like correspondence type work, or is this online training?
Everything.
Okay.
So I did an in-person retreat first and then followed up with online work.
Right.
I know I have a few books here. These are a couple of the books that I was required to read when I did my training through an organization that does not even exist anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that leaves my doula credentials, but.
Well, you're a midwife now, so I think you're good.
So, yeah.
But yeah, we have a long reading list where we learn about nutrition, lactation, birth physiology, birth support, how to be a good support person. I had to read a coaching book.
I remember having to write essays too on some of these things.
Yeah, some people have you write essays. I had to do a lot of reflecting on the readings and work that I did.
And then there was a requirement for the organization that I went through. We had to have 4 births that we donated as a doula to get kind of some on the ground experience.
So most doula organizations are going to require that you attend a certain number of births. And then usually they have the people write a review of sorts on how you did.
Had to have references and reviews.
Some people have you do them for free and some people allow you to get paid for that, because as a doula, especially for people that are young moms.
You've got childcare to pay for, and
we have
probably
to cover
pizza for the dinner that night, and
and I have to pay for meals at the hospital. If I'm at a hospital.
Speaking of costs, what is the average cost of a doula in our area?
Yeah, so Tri-Cities area is still pretty low compared to the national average. Our average cost of a doula here is between like $500 and $700. There's a couple a little bit below, and there's one that I know that's a little bit higher than that.
And then I have heard from a few of the doulas that if you're really having a financial hardship, that they do sometimes offer a sliding scale or payments as opposed to all up front.
Yeah, definitely.
And you had mentioned to me earlier that HSA accounts or FSA accounts that you can pay for doula care through that.
Yeah, so a lot of HSA accounts, FSA accounts have a code that you can use for reimbursement of your doula expenses.
Right.
They usually require that you pay for them up front. And then you get reimbursed unless you have a card.
I have actually had some insurance companies reimburse myself as a doula when we've coded billing that way for like transfer to the hospital.
Yeah, my best advice is to check with your own insurance policy and see what they have covered and listed and take advantage of any benefits that you have. And doulas really feel like everyone deserves to have a doula at their birth. There's no birth that wouldn't be
I would
benefited
love
from having
if
someone.
every home birth mama had a doula even.
So is there any
Absolutely.
statistics or anything that you can share that the effectiveness studies that they've done on doulas and what kind of impact it has on births?
There's a lot of evidence now on the way doulas impact the birth room. In fact, they just had a large review of several studies published in 2017 that covered 15,000 births.
Wow.
And looked at the evidence of what impact a doula has on birth outcomes, medically and emotionally.
Right.
And they found some really fascinating things, actually. So it's important, first of all, to say that these people were totally random participants. So some people wanted all the drugs. Some people wanted no drugs. Some people wanted immediately cesarean section. Some people wanted absolutely nothing. Right. So it's all walks of life.
And this was in the hospital, different ages, different economic groups.
They accounted for income.
A great mix.
First birth, second birth, third birth. Were these first time moms or?
I don't know that one. I'd have to go back and double check.
I'm going to have to look up this research. I haven't read that one.
Yeah. So it's the Cochrane Review, Cochrane, 2017. And so some of the statistics that they came out with were pretty mind blowing. Number one was there was a 39% reduction in the risk for having a cesarean section.
Huge.
Wow, that's awesome.
If you had continuous support from a doula.
It's more than a third.
They even compared it to having just continuous support from anybody. And having a doula specifically was always like 95% of the time.
Always.
I always be careful to say things in always or never.
Always
right?
minus 5%. Is what you're saying.
Always minus 5%. We're higher, right? So when you compared cesarean reduction with a doula versus a labor and delivery nurse that didn't leave you, it was still higher with a doula.
Wow.
You know, a doula is constant.
A doula is constant, but even when they had a labor and delivery nurse stay with them the whole time, just to compare whether it was just a person being there or whether it was a doula specifically.
No, I think it's
a
person that is mentally, physically, emotionally present 100% with you for the entire time.
They also found really cool things like there was an increase in people's positive feelings about their birth afterwards. When they interviewed people that had continuous support from a doula, they viewed their birth more positively. They had less trauma from even difficult births. They still felt good about what happened.
Felt good about their birth.
They did. And that's really important.
So do you have like a particular doula story that you could share with us? Like a birth that you remember just being really just mind-blowingly emotional where you felt like you made a huge difference in someone's life?
It's hard to pick
And can you do it without crying?
No.
Tears are okay on More About Birth. So.
Well, and this is how I know that this is something I'm supposed to do.
See, she's tearing up
I know.
already.
I know. It's emotional.
Don't make me cry.
Don't make me cry.
Yeah, okay.
I connect so much with the families I work with.
It's awesome.
We get to know each other.
You're going to make me cry. We need Kleenex.
You asked
We
for
do
it.
need Kleenex. We work so closely together. We talk about intimate things, fears, hopes, dreams, disappointments. Thank you.
Kleenex to the rescue.
Just blame it on the hormones.
Oh, gosh. I'm not even pregnant right now. That's the worst part. But there was a family that I worked with early on in my career, and they were attempting to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean, a TOLAC, a trial of labor. And she was really nervous. She had a lot of anxiety. She was really unsure about her capability of birthing, really nervous about whether she could handle the intensity of a birth. And we talked a lot in preparation for the birth. We talked through a lot of her fears and anxieties. We did a lot of planning and working together and talking about what strengths she already had and what things she had gone through already that showed how much strength she had. And in the birth room, You know, we always say that you reach what we call the gate of great despair, where you feel like giving up, right? Wow. Some people reach it earlier. Some people don't reach it until the very end. But there's always a moment in birth where people just feel...
You just don't think you can do it anymore.
Just don't think you can do it anymore.
And isn't that true about lots of things, right? You know,
Absolutely.
exercise and losing...
Body training a toddler.
Losing weight, college tests,
And we got there. And, you know, I told her, I said, if you're good with how you feel about this birth, if you are proud of the work that you've done already and you want to have a cesarean again, let's do it. Let's just push the button. You can have it. I'll support you. And that's all she needed to hear, was that it was okay for her to make that decision. And she said, I want to keep going.
Wow.
And we had that same conversation like 5 times.
Yeah.
Where she just kept getting to a point where she couldn't do it anymore. And I said, okay. I said, you're doing awesome. You're look at the monitor. Your baby looks great. You're doing okay. You're fighting so hard. I'm so proud of what you already accomplished. If you want to say this is enough, it's okay.
That was all it took for her to know she could do it.
Yeah. And she got to decide.
But she got to choose.
She got to decide that she wanted to keep trying.
Oh,
and we talked about it afterwards. And they were so sweet. Oh, my gosh.
So she had a vaginal delivery.
You know what? She made it to 9 centimeters. And then there was some medical things that came up where we ended up making the call to have a cesarean section.
But you know what? I bet after you giving her permission that she felt awesome about her birth.
That's the coolest part, is when I came to talk to them after the birth was over at their home, they were so incredibly happy with how their birth went.
When you described doing a doula as like Shirka off camera, and you were like a Shirka to them. You led them up the mountain and helped her. Yeah,
Sherpa.
Sherpa?
Sherpa.
Oh, Sherpa. Okay, there I go. English 101. So you led her up the mountain.
Yeah, I stood by their side and I gave them space and information to make their own decisions.
And it's not about the end result of the birth itself, what venue you're in or what route you took, whether it was C-section, vaginal, vacuum, extractor, epidural or no epidural. It's about the journey.
It's about the experience that you have. And it just really cemented to me that, yes, birth outcomes are important, but really
the journey,
the experience that you have on such a highly emotional day, you're going to remember for your whole life. If you can be supported, if you have all the information you need to make decisions, if you feel like you have worked hard and done your best, and you get to decide what happens, you can still have a positive birth. So I'm not anti-cesarean section. I'm not anti-Pitocin. I'm not anti-epidural. There's a time and a place for everything. And I just want to make sure that that's what you feel like is the best choice to move forward.
Awesome.
That's a perfect place to end this with that great story.
It was a great story,
Is my mascara running?
No, you wiped it off with your tissues.
Barbara Walters would be proud.
I'm so glad you came today, and maybe one of these days we can get together and do a podcast about your birth story.
Yeah, I have some pretty interesting ones. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that's the end of today's More About Birth. We have been blessed to have a doula with us, Andrea Dietzen, and she shared her heart, and that's awesome. So we hope that you will stay tuned for more about birth in the future, and have a great day and stay safe, please. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only. Please check out Natural Care Midwifery and our podcast page for our full disclosure.